because we're back here on We Are Judging You, episode number 2, and there are many, many things happening in Texas right now, particularly in the state house, the legislature. Lots of changes upcoming, and I think it's important maybe we go through some of these and give everyone just a bird's eye view of what is changing, I guess, the day after tomorrow, a couple of days from now, September 1. And it's going to affect all of us. Doesn't really matter if you are Republican, Democrat, Independent, housed, unhoused, gay, straight, whatever. It's going to affect you. So high-level review of one that I'll keep coming back to is the practice in the civil courts, okay? Now there is a mechanism by which all district court judges, or really all judges, have to rule within a certain period of time if a motion to dismiss is brought before them. Previously, you can't put any deadlines on judges. Judges had no deadlines to do this, but now there is going to be a deadline. So we'll get into that more. And Bertazza, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so there are going to be about 800 new laws that come into effect September 1. And as everyone knows in Texas, our legislature is a bit weird, and it's and the way that it operates is not a full-time legislature like states like California. So we said that the only way you can protect, from a government doing too much damage is by limiting the amount of time that they are in Austin passing laws and so forth. So in our Constitution, they meet every other year, odd years, January until the end of May is the regular session. And they get a chance to put together a lot of stuff, good and bad, I guess. And then it's up to the lawyers and the judges to sort of sort it out for the Texas citizens. This year, there was a little bit of interesting sort of dynamic that happened at the very beginning. The Texas House could not decide on a speaker. The past speaker sort of had a very tough primary battle and barely won his seat. But he was persona non grata with the Republican caucus. There was a little bit of horse trading. The preferred candidate or the nominated candidate from the caucus, David Cook, did not get it. It led to a last-minute surprise with Dustin Burrows, who came in. But what that means is they had a little bit of less time, the Texas House, to actually work on bills. But yet they still got 800 to pass. And to pass, it has to mean the Senate and the Texas House both approve the bill, and then it goes in front of the governor. Some of the most notable things that happened in the past session was the laws that didn't get passed, the ones that either blew up at some point because of politics or just timing. But the main one I think that everyone knew about that got vetoed, so this is a bill that doesn't become effective, was in regards to THC. It was one of the pet projects of the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick.
And the alcohol lobby.
They wanted to get THC banned. Governor Abbott, basically on the last day that he could, he vetoed it. And then he introduced it back in the special session. I'm not sure if they ultimately passed something, a compromise on basically taxing it. So that's a bill that is not going to become effective September 1 because it got vetoed. But we're going to talk today a little bit about some of the bills that came into play. My partner, George, was talking about a bill regarding one thing that's really important to us as civil litigators and trial lawyers is to do with motion practice and a motion for summary judgment. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. I will say thank you. I'm really excited about this podcast. First time I'm on, but second episode. And I did also want to comment on George's beautiful Indian kurta that he's wearing.
Kurta time. It's kurta time.
So.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who might be looking at this, wondering who the hell are all these people that just got mentioned, at the top you have Governor Abbott. He's a Republican. And then you've got the Speaker of the House.
Yeah, Dustin Burrows.
Also Republican.
But accused of being a rhino by many on the right.
Okay, which means Republican in name only, for those who aren't up with the lingo. I mean, I personally became in that moment of veto. I became sort of a fan of the governor because he wasn't the lieutenant governor's bitch. He was basically taking a stand and saying, hey, this is a product that potentially helps a lot of people, millions of Texans. It's silly to get rid of it. It'd be silly to ban it, especially when we have other things that are a lot more dangerous to humans, like alcohol, which is, I think, now the third leading cause of cancer in the United States is alcohol.
Wow.
And so, rumor has it the alcohol lobby made substantial contribution to the lieutenant governor's campaign to push this agenda forward, which he dutifully did, and I'm glad that it got vetoed. But we may see it again, definitely in some form or fashion, but it hopefully will be more of a regulation, not a complete ban of THC, because it's legal in 22 or 23 states now. I just got back from the nation's capital. It's legal there. It's legal in New York, legal in Nevada. I mean, East Coast, West Coast, THC is legal everywhere. I don't think there's a reason why Texas has to be the only state to ban THC that's derived from not even the cannabis plant, a cousin of the cannabis plant. So, and there are a lot of health benefits for a lot of Texans. So, I mean, I've got, in our practice, whenever you file a case, one of the things that you have to do is go through what's called discovery. You may have heard this word. A lot of money gets made in discovery. A lot of time is taken in discovery. The parties get to ask a lot of questions of each other. Obviously, they get to do interviews of each other, we'll call them. Sworn testimony gets taken. And if you're lucky, you get enough admissions to benefit your position so that you might attach that testimony to a motion, like a motion to dismiss or a motion for summary judgment, and either limit the theories that your opponent has against you or outright dismiss them, okay? We just had a case, our second oldest case in the firm got dismissed yesterday in our client's favor, so we're happy about that. But now, that's a case where the judge had the MSJs, or motions for summary judgment, pending in front of her for months before she took them up. And that is not uncommon in a lot of counties. The wheels of justice turn, but they turn slowly at times, but they do turn in the right direction. But according to this, I guess, Senate Bill 293, the judges have a specified period of time to rule on the motion. And if they don't rule on the motion, that gets reported. And there's no clear penalty that's announced in the statute, but it would potentially provide the basis for an appeal there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to be seen what the effect is going to be with this law. So SB 293 did a few things regarding duties and obligations of judges, and we hear a lot about duties and obligations of lawyers and and people litigating in the courts. You really don't hear about the accountability that judges have. So and there's a few things here. A motion for summary judgment is really important because if there's a clear issue that can be resolved without having to wait for when your turn gets called for a jury trial, or which can take years now at this stage, right? This is not a short circuit. Mm-hmm. You may be stuck in litigation for years, and that's not because nobody's doing their job. That's just the reality of it, right? We had a case, our oldest case. So George was mentioning his the one that he just recently resolved. The oldest case was a 2015 case, right, that we had that just resolved last week. We got that dismissed too. We filed the motion to dismiss that. Got resolved. 10 years. There were 3 attorneys on it. One of them, God bless him, he passed away. And we used to joke about, if this case goes on longer, who knows, where we're going to be. I definitely went from a black beard to a very salt and pepper beard over the course of this case. There were 17 continuances. Part of it came during COVID, and that's the reality. Now, the thing that really stopped us was we had a motion for summary judgment pending for
Right.
7 years.
7 years.
And I get it. I mean, a lot of these cases, the judges want to basically signal and say, go settle it, between yourselves, and that is what happens. But if you don't get a chance to resolve these cases early, you're just waiting. And if one side doesn't want to try the case for whatever reason, especially when it's the plaintiff who brought the case, you get stuck in a loop. The courts are catching up. Today's the 8-year anniversary of Hurricane Harvey. That was the first hit that Harris County and Houston courts took. Put everything off timeline-wise. Number 2 was COVID hit and everything moved. So when Harvey hit, what happened was a little bit of inside knowledge, but everyone, the courthouse knows this. The criminal courts blew up. The sewage system in the criminal courts blew up. It was uninhabitable, unusable for a number of years. Moved all the criminal courts and the civil courts in the same building, and it was a sight to see. We're on the civil side. Our jurors and our witnesses and our litigants are a whole different class than sometimes in the criminal
So you
courts.
walk into the court. I remember that. I had a few hearings. You walk into the court, and there's a criminal judge sitting there,
Right.
calling his or her docket. And so you had to, as the civil lawyer there on a civil case, you had to wait until that entire docket was done before your case could
Right.
get called. And sometimes they sent you to a completely different court,
Right.
which is not
Right.
too standard in Harris County.
Right, exactly.
So,
Right. But what had happened there, what I meant to say was, criminal always takes first priority. Everything else slows down. And that meant all the civil cases in the 2017-19 were delayed. Then COVID hit. COVID caused a lot of cases. You weren't having hearings, you weren't having trials, had to be in person. So it slowed down a lot of stuff. So you're now finally catching up. I mean, I'll say the judges are doing a better job of trying to dismiss and force people, but there's only a limited amount of time that each judge can have to have a jury trial going on, right? If they do a 2-week docket, that means every 2 weeks when they're in session, they get to call a jury trial. Now, some cases can be resolved in a day, some can be resolved in 2 weeks. I think one of my friends just had a 3-week trial in Fort Bend County, right? Neighboring county to Houston. And that's 3 weeks. The judge is doing nothing from 8 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. that case. They're not getting a chance to review motions and things like that, right? And do the other work. So there's very limited, and every judge doesn't have a trial every day, right? Like maybe in a month they have 2 weeks they do trial and 2 weeks they don't. So what's happened is that you have a limited amount of time. Cases are going up. The number of cases that get filed probably every year. There's a 10% or more increase in cases filed, and to get them resolved, it's the same number of days or less. And the amount you have. The other thing that happened, I think this is a distinction in some ways of having conservative and Republican judges versus Democrat and liberal. Democrats got elected and said, we want to give everyone their day in court, right? And that sounds good in principle. But if you're giving everyone a chance, the good cases and the bad cases, the same amount of time in court for their good day, that means the good cases and the ones that shouldn't, are stuck, and the ones that should never have been filed and are based on, allegations, harassment, are stuck, right? So, the case that we had, the motion for summary judgment that was pending for 7 years, the individual owner of the business should never have been sued. It's clear in the Texas Business Organizations Code. If you're just being sued on the basis of your company that you own is being sued, you really shouldn't be in it, right? So, our client was stuck in it for a number of years. Whether or not his company needed to be in it is a different story. So that's what we see, right? Like if judges are not ruling on motions for summary judgment, the only avenue you have is to go to trial or to settle. And to force someone to settle when the law is against them, to me, that's unjust. That's not a good outcome. You can't say the wheels of justice are turning. And then you're just saying, hey, pay up. You get sued, pay up. And, and people have figured that out, and they can game the system in that sense. So I think this is going to be a good change. SB 293, one of the changes is codifies a change in the government code. Each judge has 45 days to hear a motion, so for summary judgment,
right,
and then they have a total of 90 days to
decide.
Yeah. And if they don't, that gets put in a report. Right now, there's no teeth in that. It is what it is. It'll be a report that goes to the presiding judge of each region, and then it's sort of up to the presiding judge on what to do. I suspect first few years, nothing is really going to happen, at least until they get their data and really see are judges being slow or is it just anecdotal, right? Number two will be, I think what's going to probably come out of this is in re-election campaigns, I think this is going to become an issue. If you're getting primaried or somebody's running against you, because in Texas
to make a decision.
Right, Texas district judges are, and again, I've heard many people say, I don't care, it's a good judge, bad judge, just make a ruling. It's, you got to call balls and strikes, and that's the job as a judge.
Right. No, completely agree.
At least if you say no, then you can rethink your strategy. But if you're just waiting for a ruling, what can you do? What can you tell your client, right? What happened in the case? I get call updates every Friday. What happened? Nothing.
Nothing.
And how many years can you tell a client that, There used to be a way, you couldn't force them to rule, but if it was going on for a long time, lawyers started filing what's called a mandamus, saying the judge was being unreasonable in making a decision, and then go there. But even for that to happen, and basically you sue the judge to make a decision.
Right.
Chances are, once the thing gets filed, they're going to deny it, right? And that's easy on a motion for summary judgment. Just deny it and let the parties, still go. And that's for another episode. We'll talk about that. But mandamus is expensive too, and that's an appellate case.
Right.
So we're trial lawyers. You have to get an appellate lawyer involved.
Draft it up, file it. Then that takes it to the next level of judges, and they look at it, probably a panel of 3. And if you don't like that decision, you can try to move for a larger panel to make a decision, but that's more money and more briefing. And then if you appeal it from there, it goes to the Texas Supreme Court, who, in Texas will probably back up the Texas legislature as much as it possibly can. So, I don't know. There's no real, teeth, like you mentioned, in the law. There's just a provision indicating courts have to issue a written ruling. It can't even be oral and on the record. Has to be a written ruling on the MSJ within 90 days from when it was argued or considered. So yeah, I think it's a push to move cases faster and move it through the court system, but I think it's also a push to take judges out who don't make decisions at all. That has become sometimes it's not a problem at all. Sometimes it can be a very pervasive problem, just depending on the judge that you get. And so, in our case, like you mentioned, 7 years waiting on a motion for summary judgment to get ruled upon, which had it been ruled upon in year 3 when we filed it, client probably would have wrapped up the case by year 5, regardless of which way the judge ruled on it. So that case kind of went on for a lot longer than it had to. But just being in court now, and it's 2025, and you hear a judge, I heard a judge the other day call a case from 2013.
Wow.
How has that case not moved faster? And I really don't blame the lawyers. I refuse to blame the lawyers, because the judge, if they don't make rulings, the case will stall. And if they are making rulings, then, a judge has a very, very important sacred duty to manage the cases on his or her docket and move the cases along. There are already suggested frameworks for all of these cases. Time-wise, they're already suggested. They're in the code. Some will be shorter than that. Some will be longer than that. But now it seems like the legislature they're creating an opening, which could be used against local judges that aren't making any decision whatsoever and just letting things sit. And a lot of times judges are elected. Not so in every state. In some states, governor gets to appoint all the judges. Here, the governor really only does that during an empty seat or the formation of a new court, or if someone's removed, until the next election. Otherwise, judges are politicians in Texas. And sometimes you get these courts that don't want to hurt anybody because they might hear about it in the next campaign cycle, but what can be just as damaging is inaction, because then people are just like, what the heck are you doing there? Right. Why are you collecting on state funds and not making any decisions? And we've actually had that problem before. We've had judges that just, for whatever reason, never make a ruling, right. Even on simple issues. So ultimately, I think that kind of stuff hurts the clients.
No, of course. I think the one teeth in the bill is that if there's a persistent or consistent failure for a judge to make rulings in timely manners and follow these standards and these time practices, right? I think they can make a judicial commission complaint. But when you do a judicial commission complaint or you do a mandamus, it's you know that saying when they say, I think what show is it? If you go for the king, you best not miss, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. If you go for the judge, you better not miss, because
Right.
if you appear in that judge's court again, or your client, and that's the thing that clients have to think about when you ask them, like, hey, it's been 9 months, it's been a year before a ruling has been made. Do you want to file a mandamus? They're like, I'm having to pay additional money to make the judge do their job, so they're already a little bit tasty, salty about that. Next thing is that obviously they're gonna have to pay a little bit more money, right? And the lawyer. But third thing is, you don't know. I mean, you may let's say you get a favorable ruling, and the court says, appellate court says, judge, you must rule by 5 p.m. There was one judge notorious for this. I think she had like 17 or 18 mandamuses like this had racked up, or a high number,
Yeah.
maybe not 17 or 18, but a high number of them, right? The judge was like, and the appellate court said, you need to make these rulings by 5 p.m. I think there was like, in some cases, the judges got ordered to go to continuing legal education and stuff like that.
Some were ordered to have a mentor.
Right, to have a mentor or do stuff. And it is, I mean, we all chuckle, and it happens, but it doesn't help justice move along faster.
But it's
right?
not like, why are you a judge if you have to be ordered to have a mentor? Why are you a judge if you have to be ordered to do the judge things that judges do?
I thought about that. I went to a CLE. It was on wellness. Apparently, the rates of depression and anxiety for judges are quite high. So I hear your point and I get it, but apparently it is isolating job. But that doesn't mean you take it out on not doing your job. But I'm just saying I understand.
What would you think if someone introduced a bill saying that in order to be a judge, to qualify for any court in any county, and Texas has 254 counties, there's a lot of them, you have to go through a mental health assessment first.
I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea.
Can you imagine that?
A health. I mean, the health, and we make our police officers and our soldiers do it.
That's right.
They got to pass their physicals and a whole bunch of stuff. So why not I think a lot of lawyers might not fail, not pass
Right.
the mental health assessment. So I get it, but that may not be a bad thing. So
Yeah, and then there used to be a push to have judges be more qualified in whatever field that they were coming from when they were in private practice. And I was never a fan of that, because some folks have entertainment background, some folks have a trial background, some judges have never had a trial but have a very, very extensive business background. So how do you choose which experience is relevant to be a judge? You're sort of hearing everything if you're in the district court, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked about it a lot. I think I think the way that they do it at the federal court level, right? Where you have this whole sort of informal system of picking the best of the best, right? Kind of thing. And the politics obviously play into it. Background and stuff like that. And then having it as a way, the blue ticket, or what do they call it? It's like when basically you have to get approval from your home state senator, right, if you're going to get approved. And ultimately the president picks, right? I think that's the thing. The only thing is right now with Governor Abbott, he would need to be able to compromise and not just make a political move, right? If you wanted to have that power, people would have to see that he's using it fairly, right, and trying to put on not just Republicans on the bench. But ultimately, these elections, I see the point, but elections for judicial candidates, which are partisan, right? Partisan elections, I think ultimately you get in the predicament you do. And it's not just Houston, it's everywhere, right? So there's got to, and maybe you got to do what, some states have, I think it's called the Missouri system, where basically when you get on, you then basically get voted up or down. If people like you, you get to stay on. If they don't like you, then a new replacement gets put in. Maybe that's the best compromise.
Yeah, I mean, it's more being a politician. It's really more about who you know at that level than necessarily what you know. But you mentioned partisan, which is an excellent segue into what the nation has been talking about, what's been going on down here in the Southwest. Redistricting, which apparently was signed into law by Governor Abbott, I think today, August 29th, 2025. And so there's some new maps that have been drawn. And I guess 5 of the 7 or 8 maps that existed have officially been adopted as new congressional districts. which, we've heard tons of objections to it. There have been a lot of support for it, a lot of protests against it. And so the Democrats, of course, in Texas left, or enough left to destroy quorum. They called it breaking quorum. Some went to Chicago, others went to New York. I'm sure one or two went to California. And then after about 2 weeks, that was all over. Now, being the true blue that I am, wearing my wearing my gear today, I can tell you, Democrats, I think, could have done a lot more there. There were threats. The governor said he was going to activate agencies to hunt them down, right? Drag them back to Texas, which, in my viewpoint, that would have been beautiful politically for the Democrats, because I think a lot of the public would have said, what the hell is going on in Texas? Why are you dragging your lawmakers back? You guys just can't agree on something and pass it like they do in the other 49 states. So none of that had much teeth outside of Texas. There was a request that I think the Texas AG made to a court in Illinois to try to issue an order that would force the Democrats to come back. I don't think that was successful. But, there was a lot of political play, political maneuvering back and forth that ultimately led to what I predicted in episode 1 was this is going to wind up in the courts. And now that's what they're talking about. But the issue with the courts is that it's a partisan issue. It's entirely partisan. Courts are very careful to wade in unless you can convince them this is about race, alienage, national origin. This is about a protected class and it's being violated. Because the federal Supreme Court has already indicated that Title II of the Voting Rights Act, they can't wait to get that in front of them again so that they can dilute it, strike it down, or do whatever they want to do to it. But that really is the only legal shield that the Democrats had in the court system to try to invalidate these red maps. I'm going to call them the red maps. That's what they were intended to do, and that's sort of what they do. Yeah. But I think that, relying on California and relying on New York exclusively should be the part of a much larger strategy. Relying on the courts in Texas to rule on this very partisan issue in the Democrats' favor, I think it's just a long shot. And I think it was a long shot for a long, long time. And I expected them to be gone for at least 30 days. You give it 30 days, you go hang out in Chicago, beautiful city, you can hang out in New York, there were threats that there would be fines that would be assessed against the Democrats on a daily basis. All of that is political maneuvering. Could the fine be assessed? Of course. But could a donor come in and take care of it? Of course. There's no end to political money in either party. There's just no end to it. So to me, it's just like, it's not really about the money. It's a lot of political maneuvering. And I kind of feel like ultimately just enough Democrats decided to defect or work with the Republicans to get it done. And I think it's going to damage the Democratic Party in Texas for a long, long time. I think they're going to remain sort of outwitted, outsmarted in the minority in all counties except the most populated ones. Right. Dallas County, Harris County. There are a few other Democratic pockets throughout Texas, but I just think a lot more could have been done there before just relying on the court system. Yeah.
Look, my thoughts. I was involved in some of the litigation the last time redistricting happened. I think the part of the problem is, if the Dems choose their spokesman to be...
That's our dog, Foo-Foo. Foo-Foo.
If the Democrats choose as their spokesperson, Beto Robert Francis O'Rourke, right? And what is, Ken Paxton calling him repeat loser? That's going to be the thing, right? You gotta, and that's unfortunately, or fortunately, For my side, it's fortunate, but I know for Georgia's side, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Texas Democrats many times play to lose, and that's you went away for 2 weeks. You were trying to use it as a fundraising. At least that was the allegation, that you're using it to fundraise, to be gone, and it didn't go anywhere because you came back in 2 weeks, and it was much ado about nothing, and you still ended up with redrawn redistricting map. I mean, look, the state is Republican controlled. There has been no Democrat elected to state office since
93.
93, like
Yeah.
Aaron Richards, and there was I think one other official. They've tried, I think Allred made a push against Cruz last time. I think he's running again for senator, or he's thinking about it, against Cornyn or Paxton, whoever comes out of that. So I think part of the thing is Democrats don't have a strategy, definitely in Texas. I think the national party sort of saw this as a good issue to mobilize their own state legislatures, like Governor of Illinois and Newsom were both trying to be viable candidates on the Democratic 2028. So they saw this as a good way of creating an issue, getting their own. I mean, people saw Pritzker, saw Newsom, and I know those two states are now going to. I think California is putting it to their voters to redistrict. New York is doing something, Illinois is doing it, a bunch of other sort of red states are doing it. So it'll be interesting to see how the map is. I mean, yes, the Texas not the Texas House. The U.S. House of Representatives is very close, right? There's a 7-seat majority or very less than 10 seats that the Republicans carry, and it impacted. There was going to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations was herself a representative from New York. If she was going to resign, I think it would cause the numbers to get so close. So President Trump withdrew her nomination, so she's still back in the Congress. So it has. I mean, it's very close, right? So a lot of this stuff is really happening because the party that controls the House can do a lot of things, right? Main thing being the power to impeach and to do oversight and investigations of the executive. So yes, it is important. It's so close that 4 or 5 seats either way can either help a Republican majority get a few more numbers and not have to really rely on the crazies, in the there. But on the flip side, the Democrats are saying, hey, we can just steal a victory by getting these seats. So it'll be interesting to see how the true essence is of what happens in the 2026 elections. You're going to see some congressmen are going to get districted out. I think in Austin, Representative Benson and Cesar Chavez. Sorry, what's his name? Greg Cesar, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be in the same district. It almost happened here. Late Representative Sheila Jackson Lee almost got redistricting into Al Green's district, but I think they end up in the 2020.
Which I heard Al Green is considering strongly a run now for the 18th.
Yeah,
because of what happened in his district.
Right, exactly. So that's going to play out. Some of the people. One other thing. We said we'd promise you hot takes on this podcast, but Democrats really hoot and holler, and they really become activists, and they show their how strong they are when it really comes to taking out Democratic seats, right? When you have issues like feeding the poor, getting homeless, Medicare, medical stuff, and all the stuff that they say, they ain't going out of the country and risking arrest and getting fundraisers and stuff like that. So it's interesting, and I think the people who vote Democrat have also seen that much ado about nothing by their side of the aisle. And the Republicans keep on winning. As Trump said, you're gonna have so much winning, you're gonna get sick of winning, right? And I think that's what's going on. But it's not a foregone conclusion. Just because you made a district more red doesn't automatically mean, right? If the candidate has problems of their own, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to get reelected for sure. There might be some interesting kind of people running. I think here in Houston, Briscoe Kane, sort of a known conservative House of Representatives member. He announced that he's going to now run for the Texas Congress, U.S. Congress. He's going to not run for re-election for his House seat. So it'll be interesting to see, sort of who takes the gambit, and goes in. But my view is overall, this is a great win for the Republican Party. It was going to happen. It would have happened 2 weeks ago. It happened now. And if Democrats want to really affect change in the state, then they got to get the numbers and they got to get their people to show up. And if that's not happening, then they shouldn't cry and run away every 2 years to a democratic state and say, oh, this is unfair. What'll be interesting to see, I think, out of the redistricting we talked about. So let's see if the courts get involved, right? There is a whole body of law on how it works. There's supposed to be a 3-judge panel, federal court. It'll be assigned randomly, Texas judges. It can get appealed depending on what allegations are made. I'm assuming there'll be challenges probably filed tomorrow if it passed today, and those are coming. But the U.S. Supreme Court has said the protections that were put into place after 1964 in part of the civil rights era are not as necessary because we have shifted, right? And I see that, right? As a minority person, yeah, we have got better, right? As a country, we have. And there's some things that we can all we can disagree over and think otherwise, but that's what the Supreme Court is saying. Like, how long do you keep these protections in place? 61 years, 65 years, 75 years? And I think really what happens in the law is just a pendulum, right? Like, it's rather than wheels, it's like a pendulum. It's always got to keep on going. And right now the pendulum is swinging a bit this way, and then maybe it'll swing back the other way, right? So I think, yes, you're right, George. I think courts.
No, I agree on some points, but it's almost like racism has been sort of like a disease in this country for a long, long time. And so when you ask the question of, well, how long are these voter protections supposed to be in effect? 60, 65 years, 75 years. It's almost like asking the patient, how long do you plan to have cancer? Because we don't want to give you any more medicine and we'd like to stop at some point. How long do you plan on having this debilitating disease? Tell us when you're not going to have it anymore. And really, that question, I think, can't just be answered, by the patient himself or herself, and I think that the patient being America in this metaphor, how long are minority groups going to be disenfranchised? And we still have, definitely recorded pockets of disenfranchisement, whether it's people who are being turned away at the voting polls because they didn't bring a copy of, they brought a copy of an ID that wasn't accepted under a brand new state law that wasn't very widely publicized. Or you have polls that are closing at certain times because they know the constituents, they all work in that area and they're not getting off work till X time. So we're going to close the poll at X time to make sure they can't make it to the polls so that they can exercise their right to vote, valid ID or no valid ID. I mean, we still have these instances of disenfranchisement, and we still have allegations of, voter fraud that the Red Party has made. Some have a little bit of evidence behind it. Most have been unsubstantiated. But it's like, when is racism in America going to be eradicated? And unless we can answer that, I kind of think the protections have to stay.
I mean, I don't think anyone who can say racism is ever going to be dead, right? I mean, it's part of the human condition, right? I mean, it's like saying hate's going to be dead, or, there's never going to be evil, or there's never going to be murder. I mean, that's the human condition, right? But should the laws be propping up a system that's based on what was there in 100 years? I think that takes away from the America that we all know, right? That we have. I mean, look, I don't want to put it that racism is dead because we had a black president, but we did elect a black president, half black and half white, president. I mean, that itself is something, right? His parents were mixed race. I know a lot of people think he was born in Kenya or Hawaii and stuff like that. Maybe we'll never find that out. And I joke. I think Barack Obama was born in the United States, the continental United States.
But you do realize he got like 50 million votes. His opponent got something like 49.5 million
That's
votes.
the country. We're close.
Right.
I mean, Hillary Clinton talked about the 47% and the abominables and all of that. We're pretty close. I mean, I think you can say that 47% of the country is going to vote one way and another 47%. And it really comes down to that middle 6% on who got swayed. But you also can't say that, to President Obama's credit, he was charismatic. He promised change. There were things that he did that captivated, people. I mean, I was an Obama Republican. I used to tell people that, right? For the longest time. But the other thing is that, going back to this issue, I'm not saying racism is dead, and I'm not saying that the law should not be looking out for that. But at the same time, giving Sheila Jackson Lee her seat for all these years in a district where she couldn't, and all the complaints that came about her office. I mean, she was on, I know she's passed away, and don't speak ill of the dead, but I mean, how many a time was she accused of, berating her staff? And was she there because she was politically astute, or was it there because her seat had been gerrymandered in a way, racially gerrymandered, where incumbents are allowed to keep their space, right? And that's part of the problem. I think there are other issues, right? I mean, I think that need to be addressed. I think term limits on any elected official are critical, right? Especially at the
What about term limits on Supreme Court justices?
I mean, that's something that's been discussed and has been proposed. I think it would require obviously a constitutional amendment because they do get a life tenure. But yeah, term limits. I mean, does anyone really need to serve the rest of their life, right, in a position? We have it at the presidential level. We have it at all sorts of city levels, right? So that's, I think, one change that has to happen. Number two, I think, is you are going to have I think now the counter is Texas has done it, has got 5 seats, quote unquote. Then the other states are doing it. But if you look at the other states, they have like 40% of the other party, like Republicans in the voting in the presidential elections, but yet they have 0 representatives of the other party, right? So is that does there need to be guidance that says, okay, if in the last election you have 40%, you should round it up and say, hey, other places have done stuff called ranked voting, right? Like New York City has this where you don't just vote once, you vote for your first, second, and third choice, right? And you get three ranked votes, and you put in who's your first and second and third.
Would you vote for Mamdani?
I mean, I like Mamdani. I don't know if it's possible to have government-owned grocery stores. I don't know how feasible that is. But I mean, he's socially media astute, So it's funny. The other options are like Eric Adams and Cuomo.
That's right.
And I can't believe Cuomo is supposed to be the safe choice in that. It's nothing but. But anyway, it is what it is. So every other state is doing it. Every city is doing it. They have hyper partisan elections. So what's to stop Texas from doing it, right?
Yeah. So just quick overview. These are some of the other laws that are allegedly about to go into effect. Senate Bill 261. Texas will prohibit the manufacture, sale, and distribution of cell-cultured meat. Violation results in a Class A misdemeanor. And the mandatory display of the 10 Commandments in public school under Senate Bill 10. Classrooms must now display the 10 Commandments. So it's been blocked by a federal judge, but the state AG has actually said all other school districts must still comply with the law. And so there's some friction going on there. Senate Bill 1318, physician non-compete agreements have stricter standards now. Restrictions now also extend to other licensed healthcare practitioners.
One thing on that is that they're going to limit non-competes on doctors, so no more than a year, 1 year salary.
Excellent.
So, but those are for contracts signed or renewed after September 1. So if you're a doctor, don't sign anything this weekend.
Or consult your attorney.
Right.
Before you sign anything.
Right.
House Bill 40. Texas business courts are going to gain expanded jurisdiction. Okay, there's a lower amount in controversy, I think from 10 million to now 5 million. And now they can hear the subject matter of intellectual property, trade secret claims, and determining certain arbitration issues. So that could be interesting. Senate Bill 20, the criminalization of AI-generated child pornography. I mean, need we say more? Of course, that should be illegal. House Bill 229, gender definitions. Okay, so the definition of your gender has to align with your biological sex. That's a huge conversation. We're going to have to do that on a whole nother podcast. And then House Bill 5238, disrupting virtual or in-person public gatherings. Disrupting a lawful gathering, such as by hacking or tampering, is now going to be a Class B misdemeanor. I wouldn't be surprised if the disruption, the hacking, or the tampering is somebody standing up and protesting in the middle of a gathering and then being dragged down and then later charged with this Class B misdemeanor, which is up to 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine. So lots of changes going into effect in Texas in September. Our legislature meets once every 2 years. And they always tinker with the law, and typically the changes that become law will take effect that following September. And so that's where we are right now. So stay tuned for our next one. I mean, we're going to continue to judge these politicians. We're going to judge the lawyers. We're going to judge. We're going to judge all political figures, I think, in this forum. Nobody's going to be safe. We're going to judge ourselves. We're judging you. Okay.
Well, thanks for joining in. And again, this was brought to you by ESS Law Partners. This is not meant to be legal advice. Just a disclaimer. Just our personal opinions. And as we always say, your matter, our mission.